Hey, come here. You like pro wrestling? We got a little something for you. Two fans, 3,000 miles away. We each been watching for more than 30 years. Celebrating the art form, the action, the homoeroticism. We ain't rating matches. We ain't analyzing stories. We ain't experts. We just sit down, shut up, and mark out! Hello, everybody! It's another edition of Sit Down, Shut Up, Mark Out. I'm Blade Daly, and I am rejoined by my homie, the one, the only, the Joshi G! Joshi G, the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be, the greatest Canadian pro wrestling podcaster in the history of pro wrestling podcasters. Joshi G.
Hi, I'm back.
You're back. And you're back from assignment, as I said last week, and your assignment was to get over having an ear infection.
Yes. Honestly, it was a little bit traumatic because I used to get them all the time when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And I didn't get them for years. Yeah. And I was so grateful because they really suck. And then this year, I don't know what the heck happened, but I ended up with one. And I've been on antibiotics and putting antibiotic drops in my ear as well. I got a pretty bad one. And next week I have a follow-up appointment with the doctor just to make sure that my ear is cleared up. But yeah, I'm falling apart, Blade.
Well, yeah, we bonded over the ear infection thing because I too had many ear infections as a kid. I got one a few years ago after not having one for God knows how long, and it was kind of traumatic. Yeah. Like, because I had so many as a kid, I told you, and this is great podcast material, by the way. I told
ear
you
infections.
Yeah. When I had my ear checked out by an ear, nose, and throat guy, like 10 years ago, he was like, "Oh yeah, you have a lot of scarring on your, eardrum. So, it's fine, but I can tell you had a lot of ear infections." So that was always nice to know that there's a lot of scarring on my eardrum.
Well, what was funny yesterday? I was at the office for work, and one of my coworkers, when I told her that I had an ear infection, her response was, "Well, that's unusual. You're an adult." I was just like, "Well, I know, but I used to get them all the time as a kid, and I guess part of me is still a child."
That's such a Canadian thing. Well, that's unusual. You're an adult. What the hell?
That made me feel great.
Well, and then that's when you come back with like, "Yes, but I'm a very immature adult, ma'am."
Exactly.
So we got a lot to get to this week. Jam-packed episode. We had Dynamite, which the
worst episode ever. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, it was so bad. Oh my God. Ah! That's basically my impression of the online wrestling response. But first, we have something totally different. And now for something completely different, as Monty Python would say. Let's get to it, Joshi, shall we?
Yeah.
All right. Well, someone, and by someone I mean me, is a genius in this little group of ours, had the idea. You know what rules technical wrestling, right? But if you were to go look at like the Attitude Era or like even like the Nitro era of wrestling, if you were to go look at the Ruthless Aggression era of wrestling, you might have had a hard time believing that technical wrestling was going to be alive and well in 2024, right? But it turns out it is very alive and well in 2024. And it got me thinking, Zack Sabre Jr. is the IWGP champion. Bryan Danielson just retired. We should talk about some technical wrestling shit, some Tekkers shit. And I asked Joshi, who were the first people that really inspired you with technical wrestling? And then we started talking amongst ourselves. Then I put the question to the homies on Threads. And boy, did we get some responses. It was awesome to see. So we're going to be reading your responses. We're going to be talking about ours. And beyond just who were the first, we're going to talk about just kind of who were our favorites. So Joshi, why don't you kick us off with kind of the people that inspired you?
Sure, let's do this. So this might not be very surprising to everybody because I did start watching wrestling in, I believe it was 1992 or 1993, along those lines. And everybody in the back knows it. So Bret Hart was my guy. So he was the first one. So he was the first one that really stood out to me. And of course, he was a master in technical wrestling. So for me, of course, it was Bret. But also, I remember being impressed by Mr. Perfect. I thought he stood out a lot as a technical wrestler. Sorry, rest in peace, Mr. Perfect. I feel like once I started watching WCW, definitely Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero. They stood out a great deal. And this might be surprising for a lot of people, but my favorite wrestler during the Ruthless Aggression era, so the first half of it, was Kurt Angle. So like Kenny Omega, I was a huge Kurt Angle fan.
He is so good.
So good. I thought he was the best technical wrestler in the world. Mm-hmm. Everything that he did in the ring was flawless to me. I followed him to TNA. I just thought that he was capable of having a great match with anybody, so well grounded in the ring. And of course, his matches with Chris Benoit were unbelievable. So Kurt was definitely a really big one for me during that period. I also remember when Bret went to WCW, one of my favorite technical wrestling matches was Bret versus Chris Benoit.
In the Owen Hart tribute match.
Yeah, so that stood out a lot. And let me see, who else? So obviously, once I got into ROH, it was my boy Bryan Danielson. But this is basically, I'm naming these guys that I saw when I was growing up, right? So I didn't get to see wrestlers from like the 80s as much at that time. Of course, I could nowadays, like now looking back, there were so many great technical wrestlers in the 80s as well. So like, I'm just talking about like who I grew up with and who I saw firsthand.
Yeah. I was going to say with Angle is you really saw the difference between guys who grew up and learned a craft like wrestling and then guys who are like Olympic level athletes. When you saw Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar, where it's like their reflexes are so quick. The story about Kurt is that the first time he ever talked to WWE, he basically said, well, I would never lose because, like, obviously none of these guys could beat me. I'm an Olympic athlete. And so they didn't talk to him for a year. He ends up, like, being the sportscaster on some local Pittsburgh station. And then, they kind of let him sweat it long enough to where he realized, like, I got to get with the program here. So once Kurt realized, losing isn't, everybody knows this is not real. So once Kurt understood, that cheating in a match is like just what heels do, that you have to lose sometimes in order to tell a story. He was just one of the greatest ever at it. Kenny Omega, his favorite wrestler, by all accounts, is Kurt Angle.
Yeah. Yeah, when I read that, I had a huge smile on my face because Kurt was my guy. I mean, he still is, but I just remember that period when 2002 until I don't know, like 2007-ish or something along those lines. I was all about Kurt. I mean, I could share a story, but I don't know, man. You might change your opinion about me. So maybe I will not share the story with you guys because I was a little bit
you
of
can't
a nut
do
job.
That. You have to tell us the story now.
Okay, fine. All right, I will share the story. So I believe it was 2004 or 2005. I went to a WWE house show. So it was a SmackDown house show. And at the time, I was only watching SmackDown because Kurt was there, Benoit was there, Eddie was there, Brock was there. Like, these were my guys. And of course,
Raw was the reign of terror with Triple H.
Raw sucked. It was absolutely awful. So I remember I went to this house show, and after the show, a bunch of fans were, like just waiting by like the exit where, like where the garage was, and you see the cars come out. So I got to talk to Chavo Guerrero. He was like super cool. He was in his car. Rey Mysterio was on his cell phone, so I couldn't really talk to him. And of course, I see Kurt Angle come out in his car, and he, so he's like driving off, and I start like chasing after the car, be like, Kurt, and my friend's running after me. And she's like, Gina, what the hell are you doing? Stop it. You're not going to catch Kurt Angle. I was so bummed because I wanted to meet Kurt so badly. I mean, they're like a freaking 18-year-old maniac running after this poor guy. He's probably looking through the rear,
oh my God,
through his like freaking rear-end like mirror, like wondering what the hell is this girl doing. So yes, I was.
So you're like what? You're like
18.
18, yeah, at the time. Oh my God,
being a complete moron.
Wow, that is so funny. That is so funny. Well, that's quite a list. Quite a list, and I mean, so many of my foundational people are the same. I would say the first guy that I saw, and because like when I started watching regularly, it's not like I had never seen wrestling before, and so one of the first people to ever interest me in wrestling before I became like a hardcore fan was Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. The guy could move so effortlessly. And, this was at this time he was in WWF, so he was kind of doing the kind of karate, weird, like kung fu looking shit that wasn't really a natural part of his moveset up until then. The Dragon, man, he just moved so gracefully and, could just trade holds back and forth. And especially in WWF, he was really one of those people who could kind of hang with anybody in WWF and make them look better, which I think is a big part of technical wrestling. It's like one thing to like tie your guy up and make it so he can't move. That doesn't really prove anything. It's to make them look good. And so, yeah, I would totally agree. Bret Hart, Mr. Perfect. One of the other guys from that WWE period that we're kind of talking about, Ted DiBiase, was a great technical wrestler and somebody that I really enjoyed watching, especially when he matched up with like Randy Savage or he matched up with like Bret Hart or somebody like that who could really go with him. Watching Ted DiBiase with the Ultimate Warrior wasn't a lot of fun, but watching him with somebody who could kind of match him was great. Obviously, one thing that they did really well in the 90s was sell you on the fact that the world champion was the greatest wrestler in the world. So I thought for a long time, Ric Flair was the greatest technical wrestler in the world, right? And he was, to be fair, he was very good. I don't care what anybody says. Ric Flair was the man. He was very good. But, criticisms of Ric Flair, I think, are valid. He did have a lot of the same matches over and over again. He also wrestled more than anyone in his day. So, like, give the guy a break as a worker. You don't have to like him as a person. I sure don't. You know who was the John Moxley of his own time? Arn Anderson.
That's
like,
true.
he could do the technical shit, but he was a great brawler, too. But then moving ahead, as WCW moves kind of into the Nitro era, you have Ultimo Dragon. You have Dean Malenko. Stunning Steve Austin was actually one hell of a technical wrestler before he became Stone Cold.
Oh, he was. He was really good.
If you guys haven't seen WCW era Steve Austin, you're really missing out. This dude was fucking great.
Real quick, I just wanted to point out, it's a real shame that Austin sustained such a devastating neck injury because he was such a great wrestler before that. And I'm not saying he was bad after his injury, but he wasn't the same in the ring.
He leaned into his gimmick a lot more after his neck injury. He just brawled a lot, and he still had great matches. I mean, really good matches. But
for sure, he
was such a complete wrestler. If you watch him versus Brett, either at Survivor Series,
oh my god,
96, is it 96 or 97? It's 96.
96.
Him versus Brett the first time, and then him versus Brett at Mania in the I Quit match. Like, that's a different guy than the guy that became the Man later.
Yep.
So as this progresses, obviously you notice Benoit. I loved Eddie Guerrero. I thought he was super fluid, and just Eddie could wrestle any style. If you watch his later WWE stuff, like he can wrestle The Rock style. He can wrestle anybody's style. A guy I think is super unheralded. Lord Steven Regal in WCW, William Regal.
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course.
Bryan Danielson's, a guy who made such an impression on Bryan Danielson. But also another guy who's affiliated with Lord Steven Regal in his later WCW days that almost I'm sure nobody's going to mention is beautiful Bobby Eaton. The dude was so good. He kind of had that hybrid Arn Anderson style where he could, just throw hands, but he also just, go. He could just go. Regal, I would say, like, really pioneered technical wrestling in the States in a certain way where he brought that British style over and made it very accessible. So I was very into Regal, very into Malenko, very into Benoit. I was a fan of Kurt Angle. I don't know that I was a fan quite to the same degree that you were a fan of Kurt Angle.
Oh, gosh. Kurt, sorry.
But those were basically like my formative people, okay? I could go on and on and on into the current day. You have Zack Sabre Jr., who is the best technical wrestler I've ever seen, ever. He's the most innovative technical wrestler I've ever seen. But yeah, I mean, we could go on and on.
I Blade, okay, because I'm actually upset that I forgot to mention Dean Malenko. I don't think I did. I loved Dean Malenko. Oh my God. Like the fact that he could do so many different kinds of moves, like all those holds. I don't understand how anyone is capable of doing that much. So I remember he stood out a lot, like the man of 1,000 holds. That's just insane. I know that some people weren't, I guess, a big fan of his character work, but I didn't mind it. I didn't think he was boring or anything like that. I thought he was fine.
He wasn't boring. Fuck that. Like, he was...
Yeah, I guess some people found him boring. I don't know.
Like, Dean Malenko in WWF sucked. What they did to him in WWF.
Remember that storyline where he really wanted to date Lita and go on a date with her, and he was being super weird?
Yeah, well, they made him like a creep.
Remember that?
And then, like, then he was like the ladies' man. Like, he was like a James Bond type. Like, so weird.
That's pretty ridiculous.
So weird.
But yeah, like, I'm glad that Serena Deeb is a huge fan of his. He deserves all the love in the world. And another thing I wanted to say, I Blade, is that I'm just really happy to see that technical wrestling is still alive and well. I know it's not for everybody. Some people find it boring, which makes me a little bit sad because I think it's actually beautiful. I remember, you were there at the show. Lucky you. Last year's Wrestle Dream, Danielson versus Zack Sabre Jr. That was one of the best technical matches I've ever seen in my life.
Unbelievable.
And it was, you know what it was, I Blade? It was a beautiful match. To me, it felt like they were dancing. Yeah. And that's what it is about technical wrestling. It's these two men or women or, intergender wrestling where they're countering each other's moves. And I love it so much. And I'm with you, buddy. Like Zack right now, Zack Sabre Jr. is the best in the world and probably the best that's ever done it. But yeah, like it's one of my favorite types of wrestling. One of my favorite styles by far.
I guess it just blows me away how popular it really is now. Like that's some people's favorite style of wrestling. And really, I think you have to give a big nod to Ring of Honor for keeping that style so in the forefront and really, because there's so many people we could name, but we have to get to yours eventually. The people who responded, but the people we didn't name, Nigel McGuinness, incredible
Oh my God.
submission technical wrestler. I mean, there's so many from that Ring of Honor era that we could name. And there's...
Well, I believe next time we should name the women that are masters of technical wrestling.
Huge shout out to Serena Deeb, who is just an absolute dynamo. I love that she's the woman of 1,000 holds. I think that she is the absolute right person to carry that forward. But Serena Deeb, on the women's side, is the best technical wrestler in North America at the very least, but maybe in the world. I can't say that definitively, but she is fantastic.
She is.
Very inspiring to watch. Very, very good. So I put it to you guys. I asked, who were the people who inspired you to fall in love with technical wrestling? Got a ton of responses. I'm going to read them. Great, great, great stuff. So a lot of people are around our age. So some are younger and some are older. So we got some really cool responses. Ginger Snap 485 said my immediate answer was Brett, but further reflection has to be Curt Hennig. He was a great heel on top of being truly perfect in the ring. Ginger Snap, totally agree. I love Curt Hennig. I love Brett. I love Curt Hennig and Brett fighting each other. That's
my God,
just classic. Candy. Just give me the candy. Give me the candy.
I want candy. Bubblegum and taffy.
Nice. Books and Body Slams, friendo, said there's a reason why he's the GOAT and shared a gif of the American Dragon, baby. Bryan Danielson, I think, is going to be on a lot of people's lists. D Camps 2024 hater royalty. Nobody talks shit like D Camps. Hero. Bret Hart, Benoit, hate to say it, but it's true. Kurt Angle, Zack Sabre Jr., Nigel McGuinness, Bryan Danielson. That's a list you can't go wrong with.
Great
you
list.
really can't go wrong with, friendos. Everybody on that list was incredible. Reverend Redbeard said the Iceman Dean Malenko was the first I recognized as really technically proficient when I was a kid. And then there's a little sidebar conversation with some people going, hey, I can't believe I forgot Dean Malenko. And Reverend Redbeard adds, watching him in WCW was real wrestling to me growing up. He was so damn talented. Can't agree more. And you know what's the craziest thing I was going to say earlier is I cannot believe that Dean Malenko achieved all he did in the Nitro era. You know, he was the U.S. champion. He was a lot of things while Hulk Hogan was on top. And, you know, it's so hard to believe that Dean Malenko would be the one to do all those things, but he did. And so, you know, I just love that they called him the Iceman. That was the perfect way to describe him. He was stoic. He didn't talk a lot, and he was great at it.
And his feud with Chris Jericho was so fun. Oh my! You have 1,000 holds. Well, I have 1,001 holds. So legendary.
And his matches with Ultimo Dragon, and his matches with Rey Mysterio. Jericho is actually not like Nitro era. Chris Jericho could make this list, but the guy that I didn't see make a lot of people's lists, he is on a few, but that I want to give a huge shout out to because I never felt like he got to be as big a star as he could have been is fucking Lance Storm. Jesus Christ, Lance was so fucking great at technical wrestling, at any kind of wrestling. It always pissed me off that what WWE did with his character, it really angered me. You know, that, and this is one instance of Stone Cold being an asshole, where he started the boring shit with Lance. That really upset me. And I know that they felt like he could make that into a character trait or a story, but I think once you get the crowd to start chanting boring at somebody, that's death. But Lance Storm, one of the great technical wrestlers of the 90s and early 2000s. Dewey 23 said the first Wilbur Snyder. And that man is from the 70s in the AWA. Also worked in the Indiana territory. I popped so hard for a Wilbur Snyder reference. Fuck yes, a man largely forgotten Wilbur Snyder wasn't, a guy on top in the AWA, but he was a great technical wrestler for his time. If you can go on YouTube, search for Wilbur Snyder. Some of the footage you may see is him as an older man, but man, this dude could go. Really, really go. So highly recommend you check out Wilbur Snyder. Thank you, Dewey23. Jesus Christ. Neon Ghost, the homie. Damn, I didn't even see this. I think I had an awareness of the style as far back as Jericho and Malenko in WCW, but it's probably Daniel Bryan that made me notice his prowess for the Tekkers. But even after that, it probably wasn't until I saw Zack Sabre Jr. that I was like, okay, now that's technical wrestling. I get it. Neon Ghost. Great comment. Thank you. Skewered Universe podcast, homie. Bret Hart, Owen Hart, Dean Malenko, Bryan Danielson. I'm sure there are more, but trying to remember who is a technician after all those years of watching is difficult. Agreed. Totally agreed. Chrissy Chemistry asked CM Horror Punk, her partner, and he said Dean Malenko was the first. As far as who's inspired him the most, he said Bryan Danielson, but also Kurt Angle. Not fully
Kurt.
Yeah, not fully technical, but he said some really good stuff about his work in TNA that I didn't type fast enough to catch, LOL. For me, it's just Bryan Danielson. He was the first in my fave. Though ZSJ has been super fun to watch now that I'm aware of him. Great selections all around.
Agreed. 100%.
Too Fat to Cook. Back in the day, Brett and Owen. For modern day, the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson. Big Dad's 84. Eddie. Dude was billed as a cruiserweight in WCW and was plenty quick with good high-flying offense, but his ability to get huge heat by grounding flippy guys so damn effectively was gripping. From there, it was a natural progression to Dean and Benoit, then our own Lance and Candido. Hey, Chris Candido shout out. Hell yeah.
Oh yeah, he was really good.
That is so, what a great observation. Eddie did a lot of his, more technical stuff to ground the flippy dudes. Even though he could do the flippy shit, he did it to get heat. I always loved Eddie better as a heel, but that's why. And then later, Big Dad's 84 adds, my fucking bad. I totally missed his lordship. William Steve Regal, who was excellent at it back then too. So excellent that I hated him for it before I realized I was being worked. It's so true. Tenoe Barra. Honestly, El Santo. Wow. Watching Lucha Libre movies with my dad as a kid, there was always at least one 10-minute match in those movies, and that's my earliest memory of watching wrestling, and I freaking loved it. I have a few El Santo movies on DVD that you're inspiring me to bust out right now. What a great share. Nuclear Wessels SX. Sorry guys, as always, I just go for the phonetic pronunciation of your usernames. Bret Hart and Bob Backlund. Bob Backlund is another one. Great technical wrestler. The Troy LaCroix says, I had literally every piece of Angle merch. Hell yeah.
Yay, Angle. Yes. Team Angle.
Yes. Papa Jeremy says, probably Ted DiBiase prior to becoming the $1 Million Man. Another example is someone working over in Japan for a bit and returning as something more. It seemed like the extent of his technical prowess at the start was putting on a simple headlock, but then ended twisting jobbers into trapezoidal pretzel pieces. Wow. Great anecdote there. Holy shit. The Melting Pat. First, Dean Malenko. But I see someone already mentioned him, so I will shout out Christopher Daniels. Dude is so smooth in the ring and can crush it with anyone.
Christopher Daniels, he was my guy as well for like a really long time when I really got into TNA. And actually, I used to go by Fallen Angel online because I love Daniels so much. So I just wanted to share that.
Professor Degree, homie, big time homie, big supporter of the show. Without a doubt, the answer is Bret Hart, who is on his way to the top in WWF when I was around 13. Beyond just showing me the beauty of technical wrestling, Bret's style and dedication to his craft played a large part in turning my fandom into a full-blown obsession. Absolutely. Noon Grodrian, I'm sorry, friend. One of my best friends on Threads, and I've never quite known how to pronounce the username. Bret Hart started it for me. Kurt Angle furthered my appreciation. Drew Gulak brought it back alive when I re-entered the wrestling space. And Danielson is it personified for me with a worthy mention of Serena Deeb. But then,
nice.
Ooh, that cheeky bastard, the leader of TMDK, the IWGP champion, Zack Sabre Jr. is just that dude. Very much the case.
Hell yeah.
Very much the case. Elvis Cage. Tuned into ECW for the Extreme and discovered Dean Malenko, Lance Storm, Eddie Guerrero, and Jericho. Over the years, Bryan Danielson, ZSJ, Gresham, Angle, Shibata, Kushida, Lee Moriarty, and TJP. For women, Becky Lynch, Azumi, Sayuri, Natalia, Konami, and Mina Shirakawa. Wow.
Real quick, iBlade. I actually think that Sherry is the best female technical wrestler in the world.
Yeah.
So, really great shout out.
Yeah, that is a great shout out. And I've seen her wrestle a few times. I need to check out more, though. I really do.
Oh, she rules.
Trav Terra, as a Western Canadian kid who consumed WWF and a little bit of Stampede, definitively Bret and the Bulldogs. And got to throw in Steamboat and Savage. Later on, as a Smartin fan, Chris Benoit was 100% my guy. Absolutely. Hard to disagree with those picks. Dr. Fusion said Dean Malenko. Genosis 02 said mine was probably Bob Backlund, but I don't know that I really understood the different wrestling styles then. You know, he was the fucking fair. Man back in the late 70s, early 80s. There was nobody.
I just hated him in the 90s, man.
I know.
Because it was that one match where it was Bret versus freaking Bob Backlund.
And Owen Hart gave the greatest acting performance of all time.
Yes, and he made his mom throw in the towel. And then I got like super upset, and I just hated Backlund.
Well, and
so yes.
In fairness to him, he was past his prime by that point anyway,
Yeah, exactly.
But I thought he was a great character in the 90s. Oh my God, he was great. Random Eye 1131, Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit, their match at Royal Rumble 2003 is the match that made me a technical wrestling fan. Mod Revolve responds and says, this guy is just a picture of the Dynamite Kid. Oh my.
Nice.
In retrospect, I completely agree. I just wasn't aware of how good he was until I was way into wrestling already. But man, go watch those Dynamite Kid matches, any early Dynamite Kid stuff. He wasn't around for a long time, but damn, he had one hell of a peak. MD Drumming Dad 24. Ironically, I learned all about technical wrestling from watching ECW in the 90s. The chain spots were like poetry to 13-year-old me. To pick one, I can't. The Eliminators, Lance Storm, Jerry Lynn. Damn it! We missed Jerry Lynn.
Jerry Lynn.
Holy shit.
Shoot. Damn it. Well, hey, thanks for mentioning Jerry Lynn.
Thanks for giving the shout out to
Thank you.
Mr. JL. That's a very insider reference. Rock Nation 83, Bret Hart for me actually made me love wrestling. I wasn't going to be as big as Hulk or JYD, but I could dissect you like Bret did. Can't thank him enough. Fuck yeah. I mean, Bret's the constant on this list.
Of course he is, and he should be. With good reason, guys. I like this, and I like all the Kurt Angle and Malenko shout-outs.
Absolutely. I'm surprised Eddie Guerrero isn't on here a little more, to be honest.
I think, you know what it might be, iBlade? I think that maybe some fans consider him more of a high flyer. I think that's what it is.
Not So 55 says, I love most of the people that's been said already, but the first person to introduce me to technical wrestling without even knowing what it was yet was Kurt Mr. Perfect Hennig.
Of course.
Lee Mardoni, super fucking homie, just shares a gif of Bret Hart.
Nice.
Empathy for all except Nazis, a stance I very much agree with. Mr. Perfect captivated me as a kid. He was perfect. He never needed to cheat. It always felt like he could win, but it was just easier to cut corners. Perfect versus Hart is still one of the best matches ever and is 30 years old. Because of Hennig, I appreciate Bret. And that led me to Dean, Benoit, Angle, etc., all the way to ZSJ versus Danielson being my personal dream match from last year. Man, you said it all in that post.
And I love... Yeah, I agree so much, and I love your name, Empathy for All.
Yes. Wrestle Snark homie, says, unfortunately, it was the notorious Chris Benoit. However, many of the cruiserweights of WCW were there as well. Malenko, Jericho, Eddie. Ooh, that's a great list.
Look, real quick, what ended up happening with Chris Benoit is a real shame, and it sucks, and it's really sad, but it's okay to acknowledge that he was an amazing technical wrestler. Like, so as awful as, the end of his life was, don't feel bad, guys, for liking the way he wrestled. It's okay.
Absolutely, yeah, totally. Here. No, I think the fairest way to acknowledge history is acknowledge it for what it was. Chris Benoit was one of the greatest in the world. He was my favorite wrestler for a number of years. And I felt so upset, betrayed, angry when he did what he did. I had to let him go. I don't really watch his matches much. But at the same time, it's just the truth. He was one of the greatest technical wrestlers ever. Peg Me Bundy shared Eddie Guerrero. And then Big Dad's 84 said, see, you get it. And Peg Me says, I vote we get a team together to petition the ether to give us Eddie back in exchange for Hulk, Mark, Glenn, and Vince.
I would love that.
That seems like justice to me.
Oh, I wish.
The real mighty Kyle, I'm old AF, so first name that comes to mind is Dynamite Kid. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Super Awesome Jr. shared a picture of Dean Malenko. And then our homie, Bex Bastet, says Eddie Guerrero. What a great compilation of people. We did get some shout outs to people in there that needed to be in there.
You notice the pattern? Brett?
Yes.
Kurt Angle, Benoit, and Dean. Those were the four that kept coming up.
Yeah. Brett, Perfect, Benoit, and Dean.
And Perfect, yes. So those five.
And Angle, yes. You can't argue. I mean, it's just a great list. No. Okay, well, Joshi, that's our list of great technical wrestlers and people who brought us in. But now we got some business we got to talk about. You ready?
You ready?
Now, if you're listening to this podcast, if you're listening to Sit Down, Shut Up, Mark Out, you are very likely what we'd call in the business a sicko. And you can let the world know just how sick you are by hitting up my homie, Neon Ghost, and his shop on Big Cartel and buying a Sickos Club t-shirt, a mug, a hat, a beanie, a travel mug, or all of those things, or any number of his other incredible designs. He's got designs paying homage to the Dark Daddy Beast Mordos. He's got designs paying homage to the Cleaner Kenny Omega. This is not a paid ad, okay? Neon Ghost is just fucking great at what he does, and I want the world to know about it. So, if you want some rad fan-made merch, visit neonghosts.bigcartel.com. That's neonghosts.bigcartel, one word, .com. neonghosts.bigcartel.com. Check it out. Give yourself that gift today. All right. Well, AEW Dynamite was a thing that happened this week.
Sorry. It's just because, okay, I'm going to stop laughing. Just exaggerated that. Okay, sorry. Go on. I'm not going to laugh. I'm sorry.
Laugh all you want, friend. It was not a great episode by recent standards. I think we can all agree on that one. And that's fine. That's fine. People were super pissed that Chris Jericho won the ROH title. I will say that the reaction by some online was like super intense and like, I don't understand it. Okay. I totally get if you didn't like or even hated this episode. Okay. You can not like or hate anything that you want. But like some people were like, Jesus Christ. I was worried for them. I was worried for the people around them. Like they were going to go commit a crime because they were so angry at basically a very lackluster, mediocre episode of Dynamite. I mean, let's just say it. There was a shitload of promos on the show. There was less wrestling than there usually is. But you know what, guys? It's called a filler episode. I think a lot of the things that people didn't like are going to become parts of stories that they eventually will understand. The stuff with Christian and the patriarchy attacking Hook. You know, Christian called Hook Tyler and said it's not what it seems. That's clearly creating some kind of mystery. Kip Sabian finally revealing that he's working on behalf of Christian. That was interesting to me. I thought Shelton versus Sammy Guevara was it was kind of a squash, but like a super premium squash. That was really, really good, and I love that they redid the Shelton HBK super kick spot. Joshi, what were your thoughts so far?
Okay, I'm going to start off with, since you already mentioned Chris Jericho, Mark Briscoe. Listen, it's not the fact that Chris Jericho won. I actually thought it was going to happen. It seemed logical. Yep. What I don't like is that, I mean, it's been, like about a year now that, the fans in general have been saying, hey, we're tired of Chris. We're tired of Chris. We're tired of Chris. And we're not being listened to. So I'm not saying the match was bad. It was good for what it was. But if, the way that they've been booking these ROH champions, I can't even get excited and think, oh, you know what? Chris is going to be in ROH now. So at least we don't have to see him in AEW anymore. Because we already know he's going to be in AEW anyway. Right. And that's kind of what's bothering me. We've been asking Tony to use him sparingly. It's not happening. I don't feel listened to when it comes to this at all. And whenever he's on TV, I'm not interested. And that sucks because, like I was telling you in our chat, I played, this feels very WWE, where the fans are saying, we don't want this wrestler right now. And WWE would continue to shove that wrestler down everybody's throat, like John Cena, for example. Everyone wanted him to turn heel. Well, most fans. Didn't happen. It's like, oh, well, just put up with it. Or like when Roman Reigns was a babyface and people got sick of that. So I feel that's how they're handling this Chris thing, which is very unlike AEW. So I don't understand it. I don't understand why it's so hard to write this guy off for a while. He's not contributing anything to the shows right now. It's just, I feel he's hurting the shows, and that's it. I'm just at the point where he's on. I don't pay attention, but I'm not happy about it. I'm not happy that Tony is continuing to use him, knowing that people just aren't interested in him right now.
Yeah, yeah. I have a few thoughts, and I do agree with most of that. Like, I think. The thing that surprises me is this is unlike AEW, but it's also unlike Chris Jericho. Yeah, he's always kind of prided himself on being able to read the audience and go away when he knew he needed to. And now he's refusing to go away. In interviews and in other times where he's kind of speaking out of character, he kind of talks about, this is the fans think that I'm forcing myself on the audience, but that my boss wants me there. I think Tony Khan gave Chris Jericho a big extension a few years ago, and he's paying him a lot of money. And so he's trying to make the most out of that investment as a businessman. But it's to the point now where, regardless of what any one of us thinks, the sentiment amongst the fan base is that they don't want Jericho on their TV. And you do not want to force things down people's throat at any point, okay? I don't think you should let the fans change your booking plans, at least most of the time. I don't think that you should let the fans tell you, like, don't put the tag titles on the Outrunners just because they're popular right now. If they're popular still in 6 months, consider it,
Of course.
But, so you don't let the fans book the shows. I don't think that's a good idea. But
Agreed.
You definitely don't let fan backlash get to the point that it's gotten to. And I do think that is kind of what some of those reactions I was talking about online were about, is that now Jericho's the champion again. People feel like they're going to have to see him more than ever. There are also some people who are diehard ROH fans who think that Jericho taints the ROH title in some way. I don't agree with that so much anymore. I think ROH, we should do an episode where we talk about the future of ROH some point in the future.
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually thought they had a very good match, to be honest. I thought the match itself was very fun.
They did. It's just, I believe the insignificance of the ROH title now is, it shouldn't be that way. But it is. That's just the reality of it. And what frustrates me is, okay, you, for whatever reason, whenever someone is the ROH world champion, they're on AEW TV, like all the time, but hardly show up in ROH. But when it comes to the ROH women's champion, Athena, she's not allowed to be on AEW
at
TV. All. I mean, what the hell? You know, that too. It's, what's this freaking double standard?
I completely
and considering
agree.
that, considering that some woman, got injured this year, she would have been the perfect person to step in. But no, it's like you have this, one of the best female wrestlers in the world. She's reliable. She can have a good match with anybody. Her character work is amazing. And I can't even see her in AEW, but hey, I have to see the ROH world champion every week for whatever reason. I don't understand that. Like, if Athena can't be on the AEW shows, then no one from ROH should be if they're the champion. That, like, make it fair at least. You know?
I don't think having the ROH titles on Dynamite actually makes the brand more recognizable. I don't think that
it doesn't.
If that strategy worked, it would have been working years ago by now. And I don't want to see really the ROH titles defended in AEW. I don't think it makes a lot of sense. I think they'd actually be better off defending it on the indies. On an MLP show, which the bonus audio this week, I'm going to talk about my experience watching Maple Leaf Pro because, man, that was fucking awesome. But that'll be in the bonus audio this week. I'm going to fly solo on that one. Let's finish with Dynamite here. Yes, I think Jericho winning the ROH title upset a lot of people. It is building to a fever pitch, and Tony Khan needs to figure this out. It is feeling like Jericho's being shoved down our throat. Whether it's Jericho's idea or Tony's, it doesn't even matter.
It's like, just stop too much at this point. Like, listen to us, man. Read the room, honestly.
Right. And if you're trying to drive people to the streaming app, I could see having Jericho as champion maybe making sense for a short time, but have him there, not on Dynamite. So, I think have him be the kingpin of ROH for 3 months or something. That's fine.
Yeah. But I Blade, since you had mentioned Shelton Benjamin and Sammy Guevara,
I was just about to ask.
I did enjoy the match, and I did like the throwback to Shelton HBK.
Catching the super kick,
So, to be perfectly honest with you, I Blade, right now, what I find most interesting in AEW, what's pulling me in the most is actually the Hurt Syndicate.
I think it's great.
I think that's the best thing that's going on. I expected it to be BCC, but it's not. And I'm not saying it's bad. If you want to talk about other things prior and we talk about that later, that's fine. But there are certain things about that aren't working for me yet. But it's up to you if there were other things you wanted to cover.
There wasn't a lot of results. So let's just run through a few things real quick. And we will move to the BCC stuff.
Sure.
The AEW crew stood outside all night like dingbats, which honestly I found to be quite entertaining. John Silver with nunchucks forever. Get this man on TV as much as possible. He is hilarious. I find John Silver to be incredibly amusing. What I liked was Chuck Taylor showing up to pull OC aside and say, hey, man, it's acknowledged that Chuck has retired now. And he says to OC, dude, you're the only one who's fought these guys. You need to step up. We need you to step up. And OC kind of just has this blank expression on his face. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't say very much. Cut back. There's some more matches. Aminata versus Camille was really, really good.
Aminata rules, man.
Aminata looked so good in this match.
And she did things I haven't seen her do before. Like,
Yep.
She keeps getting better. Like, Camille was a powerhouse, like we know.
Yeah.
But Aminata, man.
It wasn't like the smoothest match of all time, but it like they got the point across. Like, and if they're building Aminata up as a threat to Mercedes, like, keep going. You know, this seemed to be, for now, Aminata putting over Camille as a threat to Statlander next week. But I think Aminata is at that point where she can lose, and it doesn't crush any momentum for her.
Well, and iBlade, actually, I found Mercedes Monet extremely entertaining throughout that match. Like, at ringside, I don't get how people say her character work isn't good and her mic work isn't good. She is so funny. I don't understand it. I don't know. For me, it works.
I ignore the Mercedes stuff. So, it's just not even worth listening to at this point, you know?
No. Because she's so funny, and I feel she seems really comfortable right now, and I just love the way she acts. Like, she's such a great heel, honestly, you know?
So then they have Dingbats with the nunchuck standing outside. And black SUV pulls up. They think it's the BCC, but it's actually the patriarchy. They walk inside and kind of walk past everybody. Christian talking shit, as he always does. And then they go to the ring for a promo. They go to the back. It had been said that Hook was going to confront the attacker of Taz. And Hook goes, they're in the ring right now. I'm going to go confront them, you know. And so Hook shows up, makes a play to go at these guys, when who should show up but Kip Sabian once again. And you're thinking, maybe Kip's showing up to help Hook. I wasn't, personally. Yeah. I've kind of seen this coming since last week. But Hook takes a low blow from Kip Sabian. Christian literally tells Kip Sabian to go sit in the corner. He'll deal with him later. He literally dads up on Kip Sabian, like, go stand in the corner. And they beat the crap out of Nick Wayne and crew beat the crap out of Hook. And then Christian says something to the effect of, Tyler, it's not what you think. He calls Hook by his government name. And, that's kind of the end of the segment. But I thought this was interesting. I thought it was nice that there's kind of a mystery to this as well.
Considering that we don't know when or if Luchasaurus will be back.
They got to do something.
They got to do something. So adding Kip Sabian to the faction made a lot of sense, right? So you need a plan B. So it's unfortunate.
It appears Hook is not leaving anytime soon.
Nope.
Okay, so then we got the main event. It's the Young Bucks and Jack Perry versus Private Party and Danny Garcia. Very good match, as you would expect from this crew. Private Party pulls off another win over the Bucks, and immediately after the match, challenges Isaiah Cassidy, challenges the Young Bucks, who are walking to the back, not interested. And he says, I got something for you. We challenge you for the tag titles next week on Dynamite, and if we lose, we break up. Private Party's done forever. Kind of thought that's where this was going. It's a throwback to the SCU match where the Young Bucks retired SCU. And Mark Quinn looked very shocked by this. So it builds a lot of intrigue because it seemed like Cassidy kind of set it off the cuff. This was all foreshadowed last week by Stokely Hathaway's promo saying you guys should hang it up if you can't beat the Bucks, if you can't win the titles. So very interesting. Joshi, what were your thoughts on this?
So I thought it was a really good match. I'm not sure what to expect next Wednesday. I don't know if Private Party is going to beat the Bucks or not. They added Stokely to the equation for a reason, so maybe they are splitting up. I really don't know. I would like them to stay together. I think that's what the fans want. The fans want them to win the tag belts, so I'm hoping it goes in that direction, but then why would Stokely be around, right? So I don't know. I really don't know what to expect.
I think that Private Party will win next week with the help from Stokely. And
Yeah.
I think that that's the more likely thing. They can tease like maybe Quinn and Cassidy not being on the same page about Stokely, or they can kind of make it look like it was a ruse and that Quinn knew exactly what was going to happen but was playing dumb. They can go a lot of different directions. I don't think it makes sense to break up Private Party. I don't see how either one of those guys does better as a singles.
Exactly. And it would just be a rinse and repeat of, Willow, Chris if they did that. So, and I don't think they need to turn heel either. So I'm not really sure about Stokely being a part of this. I don't know how I feel about that yet. We'll see on Wednesday.
We will see.
I'll have a better idea then.
We will see. Yeah. And then finally, the Dodge Ram drives up to the dudes with the nunchucks, but only Marina Shafir gets out of the ring. So these dumbasses were standing outside the entire show. And look, this is wrestling logic. I find this very funny, okay? But Marina Shafir is the only one who gets out of the car. The other guys are all in the ring already. They're all in the building already. They just went through a different entrance. That's funny. Hilarious. They've been standing there for 2 hours. Come on, it's dark. Wheeler Yuta, Claudio run in. Eventually, Jon Moxley joins them. And they beat the shit out of Daniel Garcia and Private Party. A whole bunch of people run into the ring to make the save, including one, Chuck Taylor, the Kentucky gentleman. And they all get murked. Everybody gets their ass beat. And Chuck Taylor gets pinned down. And they put the chair around Chuck Taylor's ankle, and he had to retire due to an ankle injury. So you're kind of thinking, ooh, that's bad. But then they say, no, fuck it. And they put the chair around his head. Much like they did for Danielson. Claudio steps on the chair, and then just after that, Orange Cassidy gets down to the ring. He was just late. He didn't step up, and his friend got badly injured. And that's how we closed the show. Joshi, your thoughts?
I mean, yeah, sure, it was a good way to close the show, but I don't know. The BCC thing, I guess I expected more. So let me explain. I just don't understand why Moxley was talking in riddles for so long if it just ended up being, oh, our faction is taking over. There was no point to those riddles. So because of those freaking riddles, I thought there was an invasion coming and they were trying to protect AEW and that Bryan Danielson wasn't strong enough and prepared for what was coming. I thought Wheeler Yuta didn't have a choice because of what's to come. But all of this to say that it's essentially just the BCC trying to take over AEW because they don't know what what AEW has become. So I kind of wish they didn't do all of those teases because then I guess for me, I put it in my head that something was coming. And I'm not saying Shane McMahon necessarily or anything like that. It just seemed like they were trying to protect the company. But now it's just, well, our faction is trying to take over, and Moxley says that everyone's working for him. So I just feel the way they went about it made it seem like they were going in a completely different direction. And, we were also analyzing things like the key, why they put the, belt in the bag right away. And now I'm just like, okay, it's just that they don't like what AEW has become. That's it. That's it. So I'm just underwhelmed a little bit by this whole thing.
I think it's just a pacing thing. I'm just pumping the brakes on you just a little bit because I think it's a pacing thing. Okay. So they dropped all these clues, right? And we start, very much like wrestling fans, we start like QAnon, like fucking putting all the pieces together. Right, to make them fit. Yeah. But I think the key is for a reason. I think the belt in the bag is for a reason. We don't know that reason, but I will say this. When was the last time you saw Jon Moxley holding that title?
Well, Not since
the pay-per-view, right?
He barely
He never comes out with the title. There's something more to the title thing, okay? Like, Cody Rhodes walks around like a fucking dork with the fucking belt around his shoulder every time you see him, okay? That's what they do in wrestling.
Yeah, that's true.
Every other champion did the same thing. Mark Briscoe always had the ROH title around his shoulder, you know?
Yeah.
There's something more. I don't know what it is. I'm not saying that it's going to be some massive invasion or a huge payoff. I really hope so. But what this week felt like was kind of a treading water and doing a little bit of build for the story, which was Orange Cassidy and Chuck Taylor more than anything. And they're trying to get to full gear, which is quite a ways away. So it's a pacing thing. They might have revealed too much too soon to get people interested in Wrestle Dream. I don't know.
I think that's probably
I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe that's what happened.
Maybe.
You know? It was like every week, riddles, the key, this, that. Then we start analyzing and whatnot. And now it's like, okay, everyone works for you and you guys don't like what it's become. But hopefully there will be more to it. I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
No, I think there's definitely going to be more to it because the hot gossip on the streets, Joshi, that the person heading this storyline is none other than RJ City. And he is the one who wrote the Tony Mariah storyline. So I have faith in this man beyond anything, okay? He wrote the best story in wrestling this year. So I still believe
makes me feel better.
There is a lot more coming, and I'm excited. However, I do get it. All right. So that's our thoughts on Dynamite this week. It was lackluster. I don't think it's worth melting down over personally, but I get it if you didn't like it or if you hated it. That's fine.
And I blame just one thing. I will say this. I am very, very, very happy that they're announcing matches in advance again. This is something that I missed a lot. And I'm really keeping my fingers crossed that this trend continues because that was the best thing. You know, like, oh my God, in 2 weeks, we're getting this match. Woo, exciting. As opposed to just seeing what the match is, going to be like the night before on Twitter.
100%.
Like, I like seeing that the week, weeks before. So I just want to say bravo AEW for getting back on track with that.
Next week, I mean, here's your card. Swerve Strickland versus Shelton Benjamin. Yes. Camille versus Chris Statlander. That's going to fucking rule.
Woo.
The Young Bucks versus Private Party for the titles. And Adam Cole versus Buddy Matthews. Give me a fucking break, guys.
Yeah,
you got a little mini pay-per-view coming your way next week. And so if this week we didn't even talk about Kyle Fletcher. I mean, we there was
that was
so
good,
much more we could have talked about. Well, but it's okay. I'll talk about it in the bonus audio. I'll be talking about Kyle Fletcher and Maple Leaf Pro. But for now, please give us a follow or a subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Tell your friends. Leave us a review in the iTunes store or in any, whatever podcast platform you use. Give us a rating, 5 stars. Helps boost us in the algorithm. Helps us grow this wrestling community. Until next time, I'm Blade Daly.
I'm Joshi G. And guys, enjoy Halloween weekend if you're celebrating this weekend. Spooky season.
Pro wrestling forever. Get the hell out of here, Jack Parrott!